Hello, and welcome back for those of you that are joining us from this morning, and welcome to those who have just started to dial in. Welcome to the CreaTech stage at CogX, which is co-curated with the Creative Industries Council, a joint forum between business and government that basically seizes opportunities for the sector as a whole and helps solve challenges. And we've had a year of those, but we've also had an enormous year of opportunity. We heard earlier this morning from the Minister at DCMS how wonderful the climate is around, literally the climate is around the CreaTech sector at the moment. It's running neck on neck for VC investment with climate tech, very apropos for what's been happening this week. And there are so many exciting opportunities for companies in this particular sector. And to tell us a bit more about this and the report that's being launched today, I'd like to welcome the next session. Don't forget to tweet hashtag CreaTech. And so without any further ado, I'd like to introduce the Wonder Woman, Janet Hull, who is the IPA Director of Marketing Strategy and the Creative Industries Council's CreaTech lead. Janet, over to you.
Thank you so much, Christine, for that warm welcome. And hello, everybody, and welcome to this special session looking in depth at the CreaTech Report 2021, which launches today. Why are we doing this research? We at the UK Creative Industries Council have been using the term CreaTech for over 5 years now, but in a rather loose way, to describe the innovation where creativity meets technology. And we wanted to create an evidence base from which to develop a business growth strategy for CreaTech. Who did we choose to help us with it? We wanted a partner for our research who would add value and a wider perspective to our thinking. And that's why we chose Tech Nation, the organization behind the annual Tech Nation report that actually discusses the future of all tech across all sectors of the UK economy. So if they can do that for ed tech and biotech and climate tech, as Christine has mentioned, surely they could do it for CreaTech too and share their learning with us along the way. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Head of Insights Tech Nation, Dr. George Windsor, and Senior Insights Manager Tech Nation, Diana Acano. And we're going to bring you some of the highlights of the CreaTech report findings and what it means for the future of tech. Just to say, this is the first report of its kind and therefore necessarily exploratory. And a big thank you to our partners DCMS, Digital Catapult and Moore Kingston Smith for sharing in the risk with us. What's the form that the report takes? Our focus in the CreaTech report is on 3 things. 1, investment. 2, skills and jobs. 3, barriers and opportunities. And we're going to go through those in turn in this session. The findings are both informative and encouraging, I'm pleased to say. So let's start with investment, and our focus here is on venture capital investment. And I'd like to turn first to George. George, I know you have some exciting big statistics to share and some projections that will help us plan the potential, I think.
I certainly do. And of course, everyone both likes and needs a big statistic. And this, just first of all to say, this was an amazing project to work on, really exploring the drivers of an incredibly critical area of UK economic development. We've already heard that. And in the last session, Minister Dinage and Tech Nation's chair, Stephen Kelly, talked us through some of the headlines. In this session, I hope that we're really going to be able to sort of unpick it and get under the hood, really think about how we can take CreaTech forward. So they talked through some of those big headlines. We're going to talk through a bit of the detail and how we take it forward. So part 1 really focused on the CreaTech investment landscape, whilst part 2, which we've published today, focuses on the future of CreaTech. And in each case, as you say, Janet, we looked at VC investment as an important measure, an indicator of what's happening in CreaTech. And you can find both reports on the Tech Nation website, technation.io. So the headline really is, despite really tough economic conditions that we've heard about, CreaTech companies raised nearly £1 billion worth of investment last year, 22% up on 2019. And this investment represented over 9% of total tech sector investment in 2020. And that's compared to countries like the US and China, where it represented about 6% of total tech sector investment, suggesting that, relatively speaking, CreaTech's more important, or at least a more dense area of activity in the UK economy compared to some of our key competitors. And it is the US and China that are our key competitors. I'll probably say a bit more about that in a moment. But CreaTech VC investment really represented about 25% of that invested in fintech, to give you a sense of context, and some of the most sophisticated technologies that have been developed in the UK and applied are happening in CreaTech. So artificial intelligence and machine learning based companies received the highest proportion of CreaTech investment in 2020, with just under £500 million raised. And actually, we know, given this R&D rich, intensive activity, that the UK has all the ingredients to accelerate the growth of CreaTech even further. Diana is going to talk in a moment, I hope, about some of the work that we did around jobs and skills, and that's one of those key ingredients alongside finance. And we forecast, as has been said, that the growth rate of CreaTech is going to really accelerate over the next couple of years. And that means that CreaTech is seen and should be seen alongside some of those strategically incredibly important areas of the UK tech economy, like climate tech, health tech, insurtech and fintech, and really should be an area taken forward. So we collected monthly VC data, venture capital data, between January 2018 and December 2020, so very fine-grained data to measure possible future growth. And we really wanted to understand what could happen if things were to continue as they are in CreaTech, but then also what might happen if there were some things that were tweaked, if we made some supportive interventions to really enable CreaTech to flourish in a way that it perhaps could do if some of the barriers and opportunities were addressed. So based on where things are already heading, our forecast shows that CreaTech investment will probably reach about £1.1 billion in investment by the end of 2021, which is a 14% increase on the record levels we saw last year. But the really interesting part is a 25% increase potential by the end of 2022, up to 1.2 billion. So not only is CreaTech a real economic powerhouse now with strong international prospects, it also represents a real movement, a shift in the UK economy, and it's delivering huge social, cultural, environmental, as well as, here, of course, economic returns to the country.
So, George, can I, very, very positive results. Can I just ask you to spend a little more time talking about how CreaTech compares to the other tech categories? Obviously, fintech is the hero, if you like, but where are we in the pecking order?
Yeah, and I think this is really where it's really useful, obviously, to have conducted the Tech Nation report over a number of years past, and obviously the 2021 report earlier this year, because it gives us a real sense of context and lets us understand the relative drivers of these important areas of activity. So CreaTech's a really strong performer when we view it in the context of the tech ecosystem as a whole. CreaTech company has raised more than energy tech companies in 2020, just under $1 billion compared to energy tech's $846 million. Transport tech, to give you a sense of a slightly larger sector within UK tech, actually saw phenomenal growth over the last year. 160% boom in 2020 with $650 million up to $1.7 billion. We saw deep tech had an increase in the UK of 17%, and that again is a huge area of activity, just under $4 billion. And impact tech saw a huge increase in investment from 2018 up to 2.6 billion as well. But I mention those things because it's important to get a sense of context, but it's also important not to forget the fact that CreaTech, and in particular, CreaTech jobs and skills, we're thinking about the companies, of course, but we're also thinking about a more pervasive set of jobs, skills, functions that span the entire economy. Those jobs, skills, and functions are having an incredibly important impact on all of these areas of tech. We need to be thinking about CreaTech as a movement as well as individual companies. So we know that CreaTech. Yeah, well, very good. We know that CreaTech companies raised more than some sectors like energy in 2020. But the really interesting is that sort of future-facing things. And I think what we have here is a snapshot. What we have here is obviously a view over a period of time, but I think the key is what we can do with CreaTech and what we can potentially see CreaTech as, and here I'm really referring to this positive force, this movement through the economy into the future. So we saw that CreaTech and climate tech, and we've heard from other speakers that CreaTech and climate tech are two of the leading industries sort of projected to see some of the highest growth in venture capital. Climate tech has really led the way, and of course we've heard earlier in the event today about some of the really important initiatives that are supporting net zero and supporting climate tech companies. Perhaps we need something similar, really, but when we've seen sort of a 35% projected increase in climate tech, followed by CreaTech with a 14% uplift over the next year, health tech with 10% over the next year, and insurtech with 2%, we can understand that we really are talking about that sort of phalanx of leading areas of economic activity, and CreaTech is at that cutting edge. So CreaTech and climate tech is certainly space to really actively support, invest in, and grow over the next few years for the UK.
And George, coming on beyond that to the international position of CreaTech. So I know you've mentioned already we're third behind the US and China when it comes to investment. But what about comparisons with Europe and other major parts of the world? And what about international investment coming into CreaTech relative to other tech sectors? Can you give us some feeling about that, please?
Absolutely. Yeah, so as you mentioned, Janet, the UK is third in the world for CreaTech VC investment. And it's in a real position of strength shared with the tech sector as a whole, which is third in the world. Overtook India in 2020 in the tech sector as a whole. First of all, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the US and China, because as I say, they're our key competitors here. I'll talk a bit about Europe and why that's the case in a second. So the US has really shown itself to be one of those sort of CreaTech global leaders alongside China and the UK. It has many unicorns in the sector, and £6.5 billion worth of investment was made into US CreaTech companies in 2020. And that was more than triple the next highest country, China. China has in itself been a very strong CreaTech force, and of course both of these countries are enormous economies compared to the UK, and we heard already that with 9% of investment represented by CreaTech compared to the tech sector as a whole, the UK really is punching above its weight when it comes to CreaTech. That's an area of strength that I think we can definitely take forward relative to these other places like the US and China. In 2020, the UK really led the way in Europe for CreaTech investment, but say that the UK was only shining light. France also received significant investment, about half that of the UK, just under £500 million, followed by Germany with 266 million and Sweden with 159 million pounds worth of investment. So very strong. And I think, again, that's worth remembering that we're part of this European ecosystem and that our strength together can really elevate. But it's also, of course, worth thinking about the UK in its own right and some of the levers we can pull here to support CreaTech going forward. And then when we think about growth trends, because it's all well and good thinking about a snapshot, but we need to think about trends and where things are going. So in France, Createc investment nearly tripled since 2017, and in Germany it increased by about 16% over the same period. So a lot more subdued growth there, still good growth. And we've seen in the Netherlands, for example, Createc investment has grown extraordinarily fast, but from a rather low base. So the UK is performing really strongly, but the competition's hot out there. We really need to continue supporting this sort of scaling growth. So when we think about Createc investment and the sort of the global picture in terms of investment coming in, when we look at UK tech overall, we see that about 63% of investment is from international investors. For Createc, that's almost the reverse. We see that about 64% of investment into Createc companies in the UK is from domestic investors. So on the one hand, it sounds a bit unusual, but actually it's a massive opportunity for us to boost international investment. And really indicatively, if we were to see that boost to the same extent that UK tech as a whole is invested in by international investors, we could expect to see possibly up to £1 billion more investment into UK tech companies over the next few years. So there's all to play for really when we look at UK CreaTech on a global stage, and certainly UK CreaTech companies are performing very, very strongly already in the world.
And just one more question for you, George, before I turn to Diana. Fantastic news about this potential for growth. Of course, we have to deliver against that potential. And it looks to me, if I've read the data correctly, that the opportunity is all around the UK when it comes to CreaTech, and that this in itself is also a point of difference from perhaps some of the other tech sectors. So we're very much in the realms of the levelling up agenda when it comes to government strategy.
Yeah, that is the case in many respects. We found that CreaTech obviously is a pervasive force across other areas of the tech economy and other areas of the economy more broadly, and a pervasive force right across the country. Certainly, tech represents that as well and is very much contributing to that levelling up agenda. This is not an exclusively London and South East focused area of activity. So Scotland, the East of England, the West Midlands, they all performed extremely strongly for CreaTech investment in 2020. But it's really worth mentioning, we found really positive and robust evidence of CreaTech investment activity in all UK regions and nations. Across the last 5 years, median investment has really highlighted the emergence of CreaTech across all regions. The southwest of the UK had the highest median investment, followed by Scotland with 1.37 million median investment into CreaTech companies. And in London, that sort of median investment was 1.21 million. So the southwest really leading the way in terms of the size of deals across the UK. In some areas where we saw slightly lower median investments, like the Northwest, Northern Ireland and Wales, we know actually from other research that we've conducted at Tech Nation, our scale ratio report, that this is quite reflective of tech as a whole. And actually what it indicates is really rapidly growing, emerging tech clusters. And CreaTech reflects that. So we're seeing rapid growth, albeit from a slightly lower base. Diving a bit deeper into that, Belfast, Dundee and Exeter, they're really tech hubs that we identified as ones to watch over the next year. They have the highest proportion of seed stage companies compared to any others in the UK. And I definitely say they are the hubs to watch when it comes to CreaTech too. And Scotland, the East of England, West Midlands and London being those real established players. So definitely contributing to the levelling up agenda in the UK.
Thank you so much, George. And now moving on to you, Diana, because of course, delivering on this projected growth opportunity relies so much, does it not, on skills and jobs. And I know you've been doing a sterling job defining the trends in Createc jobs and skills, which is no mean feat, because many of these jobs are so new that they're difficult to quantify. I know in my own world of advertising, every day I meet another job description, you know, UX designer, innovation director, creative technologists are now commonplace, but there's so many more that are coming through. So how have you gone about trying to do this? Let's start there.
Yeah, I'll just actually touch upon the fact of what you mentioned around advertising, actually, because I worked in out-of-home advertising about 6 years ago. And at that point, it was actually quite pivotal in changing from just static boards to digital out-of-home. And then now, obviously, we're looking at CreaTech jobs. So I'm sure a lot of new jobs actually emerge from that pivotal point as well. But anyway, going back to the methodology. So this was really an exploratory approach. So we used Adzuna, which is a job search engine. They cover about 90% of the UK job boards. And within that data, we looked at around 40 million job advertisements to understand the types of roles that could be defined as creative jobs. So this included, but is not limited to, roles such as artists, photographers, designers, fashion stylists. But within that category, there was a subset which you have been using for years, called CreaTech, which was formed by looking at the skills employers asked for, which was a combination of both creative and design skills. So that created the CreaTech jobs as well. So yeah, so that was the main methodology. So of course, yeah, I just
understandably difficult to do, but some noticeable trends nevertheless emerging. What are the big facts and figures that are coming through?
Yeah, so this data we looked at up until 2019. So just bear that in mind, that it's not the latest and up-to-date data. But from 2017 to 2019, we saw a great growth in the demand for CreaTech jobs. So there was an increase from 49% to 56% for employer demand in CreaTech jobs. So from this, we can infer that there will probably be a similar increase for 2020, particularly given that there is a real push for people being employed with digital tech skills. We know that now the digital tech force accounts for 9% of the UK workforce. So it's a really important area of the UK. And we also saw growth in roles such as graphic designers, which that increased by 5% from 2017 to 2019, and also user interface designer, where the demand for that role increased by 17%. So these are also roles that we know play a particular importance in tech companies, and just generally in companies, CreaTech companies that we see today. So we know, although I've spoken about design-related roles, we know that creative roles are not limited just to design. However, we must note that from the data that we looked at, we did see that designer roles, which was an example of a CreaTech role, did account for 20% of all creative roles advertised. So it's a really important area. But that is not to say we're ignoring the other types of roles that are important as well within CreaTech, but it just shows the importance of those roles.
So really high growth in CreaTech roles, way over 50% on average. And I'm wondering, how does that vary by region? Are you able to do any around the UK splits in order to show the shape of it?
Yep. So no, I guess no surprises, but in London, 75% of advertised creative jobs were CreaTech roles. But we also saw major hotspots such as South East and the Northwest, where this accounted for about 63 and 66% respectively for CreaTech roles advertised. But also just around the UK, so looking at East, West Midlands and Yorkshire, well over 50% of creative roles were CreaTech jobs. So this just shows the importance, again, of digital skills, how this combined with the creative sector, across the UK, and the major hotspots actually that is growing to this trend as well. So yeah, very positive.
And with all this huge growth, have we got this high demand? Is there enough supply to meet that demand? Is there anything in your work that can give us guidance on that?
Well, we took an approach at looking at the median salary for CreaTech roles, and generally from a salary and what is offered, we can infer the type of demand that is needed for that role. So it gives us an indication for the demand of a job. The median CreaTech salary was just over £35,000. And when we looked at individual CreaTech roles, such as an architect or UX designer, these roles far exceeded the median. So based on this, we can infer that it's difficult to fill these roles because generally when an employer is demanding for skills that are rare, the price point, in this case, the salary will be a lot higher. So, and actually I was looking at a report carried out by the University of Warwick, which was commissioned by the government. So this was launched in 2018. And it was just looking at what skills adults need to succeed in the workplace now and in the next 10 years. And it just showed around creative jobs how it has transformed to include digital in the title. So as before, where you'd have a content creator, now you have digital content creator. So it's just showing how digital products have become part of our life. We use it. So for example, even like the big tech players like Facebook and Google, but we must not forget, you know, that creative element of it. That is all very important for the apps that we use, the tech products that we use as well.
And I suppose you've also, in looking at job boards, you would have got a sense of the sort of technical skills that are being asked for. Is there anything that you can share with us on that?
Yeah, so yeah, again, just mentioning CreaTech roles were defined as roles where employees ask for skills with a combination of creative and technical and digital skills. So we saw, for example, for a designer, typically on average, the type of skills sought were like HTML, CSS, Adobe, which is design. So that's more of the digital and technical side. But then more of the creative and softer side of skills was communication. Of course, we know that is important for any type of role or business today. But also there was key skills such as influencing, storytelling, and network, which is really important to deliver on these types of jobs that we saw, which was really important.
Thank you so much. So we've reviewed, if you like, the current state of the nation when it comes to CreaTech and the quantitative analysis. But I know that there was a third dimension to our study, which was talking to key stakeholders, both within the UK Creative Industries Council and the investment and education community. And so just before we finish, Diana, it would be great to know what opportunities and barriers you identified through those interviews for CreaTech talent and skills.
Yeah, it was really great speaking to key stakeholders because, as we know, we can look at the data all day long and it shows us the what, but talking to these people actually gave us some context to understand what is happening in the day-to-day and the lived experience. So I'm really going to draw upon some key insights from the likes of Sully, Dinah, and Jessica, who shared some insights. So Sully, he really spoke about the need of creativity in jobs and creating businesses. These stem from ideas. So what we think, read, experience, who we talk to, our lived experience, that's the creative element, the side of humans that should not be ignored. And without that, without the creativity side of things, we won't have CreaTech. So that's important really to have the emphasis on the creativity, not just the technology side of things. So the opportunity in that case is really around communication. So to ensure that we're speaking to everyone, not just the usual suspects, so that we allow new innovators to rise and bring their ideas forward. And then Dinah, she's the chair of the Camden STEAM Commission. She spoke about the importance of STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, as opposed to STEM, which is just science, technology, engineering, and maths. Of course, we know there's a big push for STEM because of the digital skills gap. However, again, she spoke about that art should not be ignored, that generally is communicated as something that's not very strategic. But to ensure our businesses really continue to succeed and having access to diverse, young, local talent, we need to really drive the message forward that STEAM, so to speak, is very important. And you can use arts with a combination of science, technology, engineering, and maths. And yeah, so for people to be exposed to this from a really young age, so they know what opportunities and career paths are available to them.
Thank you so much. That's a really helpful insight. And these findings are really helpful for the creative careers work.
Yeah, and just an interesting stat, actually, which was carried out by the University of Michigan, which shows Nobel Prize winning scientists are actually 3 times more likely than the average scientist to have an artistic or craft hobby. So it shows the importance of creativity again.
I love that stat. Thank you so much, Diana. And could we call back George at this point? George, because of course you were also conducting interviews with other people about barriers and opportunities. Did you find anything here that we should take account of in terms of accelerating the future growth of CreaTech and future investment?
Yeah, and just to echo what Diana said, a real privilege to be able to talk with some of these leading stakeholders in the creative industries and tech in the UK. So many thanks for their time and input. And you can find you can find a lot more detail on what many of these stakeholders spoke about in the report that is online. So one of the things that I wanted to draw attention to really is that obviously we've heard there's a massive opportunity for growth in CreaTech. We heard from stakeholders that education, as we talked about, is incredibly important. But we also heard that collaboration and knowledge exchange, and that educating investors around the CreaTech opportunity could make a really significant difference to the prospects for UK CreaTech. And I'm going to major on that sort of educating investors part. So it matters, according to stakeholders, for both domestic and international investors. On the domestic front, it was suggested that perhaps angel investors are less aware of opportunities that exist in investing in particularly early stage UK CreaTech companies right now. And then on the flip side, maybe those companies are less aware of the opportunities that exist out there amongst angel networks and other forms of private equity and venture capital. So there's an opportunity there, and that's really about leveling the playing field in terms of information and opportunity. Then, of course, we already touched on the international picture. There's a huge opportunity if we can start to bring in the sort of scale of international investment that we see in tech as a whole. The size of the prize is enormous. As mentioned, we could expect to see a boost of over £1 billion to investment in UK CreaTech if we were to see that flip from domestic to international investment being the majority. So the scale is global, the scale is also local. We need to be thinking about both of these aspects in educating investors. There's a lot more detail online about that and how it could potentially be achieved. But in doing that, of course, and in getting investment into UK CreaTech companies, we're looking for that sort of access to finance being a catalyst for growth, a catalyst for transformation on the economy. And it will really help, as mentioned, in the levelling up agenda and building back from the disruption that we've seen over the last year. So education really is this incredibly important area, particularly with regard to investment.
So thanks very much, George, and some very clear indicators of what we need to put into our business growth plan as we look ahead for the next 3 years. And of course, we on this conference, CreaTech at CogX, are here to showcase some of that potential. And we're hoping that in the audience today, there may be many people coming from other stages at CogX to find out more about our sector. One of the things I just couldn't help but mention before we finish our session is the program we have at the Creative Industries Council to actually profile CreaTech companies and CreaTech collaborations, CreaTech startups and projects under the banner of CreaTech Ones to Watch. We're looking to select 100 companies this year in 2021 to showcase all through our program. There's 1 week left to enter this particular scheme. And so I'd love you all to go to our booth, CIC CreaTech Ones to Watch, and find out more, or look on the creativeindustries.co.uk website to find out more again. We'll also put some links in the chat so that you can take it forward. So I have really enjoyed this session with George and with Diana. This research, as we said, is the first of its kind, and it's suddenly given us some pointers of the way to take CreaTech forward. I'd just like to invite George and Diana for one last parting thought before we close our session. George, what would you like to say?
Thank you, Janet. If I may, I'd like to say 2 things, very quick things. Firstly, we're clearly at an inflection point. There's a huge opportunity to showcase, firstly, what we mean by CreaTech. And we're thinking about this range of valuable cultural and economic activities that are really cutting right across the economy, from the application of AI and deep tech solutions, really facilitated by technology, but enabled by human creativity, smart tech and ad tech, VR, AR. These are incredibly exciting, incredibly economically important products, services, experiences, and businesses. Secondly, we've really heard evidence as to the real significant impact of investment. And we've seen the incredible footprint that CreaTech is making. We know that investment is on the up. It's doubled over the last 4 years. And we've heard that CreaTech is really generating jobs for the future. But this is really just the beginning. There's so much more that could be achieved in this space. The UK has all the ingredients it needs to accelerate the growth of CreaTech even further. And just to say, we're really grateful as Tech Nation to have worked with such amazing stakeholders and with the Creative Industries Council to kick this evidence-based movement off. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you. And over to you, Diana.
Thanks. So yeah, just to echo what George said at the end, it's a great privilege working on this report. I really highlight and bring into light the opportunities that are within CreaTech. Obviously, we've seen the amount of VC investment that has gone into it, and the job opportunities, and also the opportunities that will emerge from that and from the CreaTech space generally. But I'd say the main learning as well from this, and from looking at the data and looking at the stats and speaking to key stakeholders, is really the opportunity to educate more young people around this space so that we ensure that we are driving CreaTech forward in the right way.
Exactly. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Now, we're coming to the end of our session. I want to remind you all that to find out all of the detail about this report, go to the Tech Nation website and look for the CreaTech report. You'll find the context, the background, and explanation of how the research was conducted and the methodology, as well as all the facts and figures that we've talked about today and more. We look forward to putting this into action in the years ahead, and we look forward to working with any of you who want to be part of this movement, as George called it, to join with us in making this fantastic growth project work for the UK. Thanks very much for your time, and back to you, Christine.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you also to Diana and to George for a really fantastic insight. It's so brilliant to have some data and some evidence that can underpin investment decisions, policy decisions, and just future thinking for businesses in this sector. And so great. I mean, 22% increase in investment, 50% increase in growth for jobs in the CreaTech sector. What a wonderful climate for 5G to enter and give us something new and exciting to invent with and to create with. So please come back at 12 o'clock and find out what we can do with the transformative power of 5G. Thanks. See you later.